So welcome to the Foundations of the Wisdom Project. We are going to be recording the different elements of the Wisdom Project. And I'm Iris Stammberger, the founder of the Wisdom Project. I am an organizational consultant, cognitive psychologist, and mindfulness teacher. And I'm delighted with what's happening with the Wisdom Project, and I'm here with my two friends and partners, Melissa and Clayton. So if you can introduce yourselves, Melissa and Clayton.
So I'll go first. So I'm Melissa Duder, and I'm in Texas, and I came to know Iris as my friend through her work with the Wisdom Project, which is really wonderful, and I'm very happy to be here this morning.
Yeah, hi, I'm Clayton Yakana, and I'm based in Brisbane, Australia. And I too have participated in the Wisdom Project before, and I met Iris before earlier on in one of the other online training programs we've participated in, and I'm very excited for this one.
Okay. So what are the foundations? The main starting point of the Wisdom Project is based on a strategy. And it's a strategy that says that we can design our personal lives, our families, our work lives, and even our participation in the community to be wiser. That wisdom is not something that belongs to the realm of the chosen one. We know in history that we have had different sages like Jesus and Socrates and Buddha, but we see them like isolated and different and special, and we forget that each one of them has a story where they go into the desert or they abandon the palace, and they do a lot of things. They work, they develop a muscle, a skill to become who they are. So what I explore in the Wisdom Project is this idea of developing wisdom, developing wise reasoning as a skill that can be cultivated. And I am indebted to John Vervaeke, the cognitive science professor of the University of Toronto, who in his Awakening to the Meaning Crisis video series presents the 7 cognitive styles of wisdom. He does it differently. He goes into 8 and then, but basically, what is that what is the style of being in the world? My cognitive style, my way of solving problems, my way of memorizing, my way of learning, my way of strategizing. That's cognition. What is the style that I have to follow? And then he suggests a few styles, and I put them together into a framework that I share with people at the Wisdom Project, which is the framework that you two know and have been interested in. So today, I'm going to then say why wisdom by design, which is the strategy that I follow, why the framework, why a method, and the main response to the why is the following: that more and more and more in our personal and professional lives and community lives, we are confronted with something called wicked problems. A wicked problem is a technical term, and basically it means an ill-defined problem. Like if I'm having problems with my mother-in-law, it's very difficult, perhaps she's really bad and yells at me, but perhaps not. Perhaps it's an element of weirdness between us that is very difficult to grasp. That would be a wicked problem. Or solving climate change is a huge wicked problem. Wicked problems are complex. When we start trying to solve them, many things that were not visible before become visible, and we have all the time to relearn them. We have to be patient and approach the wicked problem with what Clayton professionally calls agility, with an agile framework. Clayton is an engineer. I used to be an engineer. And in engineering, there is this movement. It has taken a few names: total quality, systems thinking. But in the last 20 years, it has taken the form of agile thinking, which is something that the software industry had to develop because 95% of the cost of a new software product was repairing bugs. So they realized that they were dealing with a wicked problem, even though they didn't call it like that. And a wicked problem needs to be solved in little chunks. You solve a little chunk, and then you see what's going on, and then you go for the next. And every time that you do a cycle, you stop and look around to see if you are solving the right problem. That's the nature of a wicked problem. So that's the strategy of the Wisdom Project, approaching it as a task of design, being agile in Clayton's language. So that's the strategy, wisdom by design. And once I have the strategy, the question is, what method am I going to use to solve the problem? Okay, the strategy already tells me, be modest, do it in little pieces. Don't try to solve a big problem. So if I really want to solve my issue with my mother-in-law, perhaps I'm not going to have just sit and plan a strategy. I'm just going to say, okay, my next conversation with her is going to be smooth. It's going to be positive. Or as once Clayton told me, Iris, it's not that I want to be enlightened. I just want to walk close to the light every day. And one of my meditation teachers, he says, every time you have an insight, it's like a little moment of enlightenment. You know, it's like little moments, little moments, little moments. So by thinking in terms of designing things, designing our wisdom, designing our relationship with our mother-in-law, our daughter, our colleagues at the workplace, we are following a design strategy. And there are specific principles that you have to follow when you are designing something that basically, you know, says start small, be modest, and review your progress all the time. Any comments or questions about this?
Yeah, I have something to, you know, hearing you describe the wicked problem and why it needs to be chunked into manageable pieces. That was very resonant with me. It reminded me of the why question. So I have young children, and they're at this stage in their development where they like to ask why about everything. And I've developed a strategy to help manage the why questions, because I mean, most of the time when you ask a why question, you are presuming that there's just one answer to the whole why problem, but actually it's a very big problem. It's like a wicked problem. And so we're working on strategies where when you're curious about the why, you now have to start thinking about the subcomponents, like the what, the who, the when, the where, and I've been encouraging them to think about those smaller components, because those are going to be answers they can get, rather than the why, because the why is really big and it's made up of those small ones. And so we play this game where when somebody asks, why is this way? And, you know, 2 or 3 people around are going to answer, why is not a good question? Ask a better question, because why is a very complex question. It's a big compound question, and we need smaller chunks so that we can be able to answer them. When it's one big chunk, it's too much, it's overwhelming, and it becomes that wicked problem that's frightening, and you don't want to approach it because it makes you stop. But a what question, that's a bit more approachable, and that one you can easily deal with.
Yeah, the why sometimes paralyzes you.
So-
In my Go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I was listening with my professional hat on and thinking about design, and that, I'm in psychiatry, and a lot of the process of treating a patient is an ongoing process of design. And I think that's hard for people to understand. They come in the beginning and they say, what's our plan for the whole thing? And I say, well, I don't yet know, because we'll be assessing and measuring as we go, right? We'll try something, and if that's not working, we'll change direction, and we'll, in small bits, go where we're going to try to get a stabilization or an improvement. And that can be very difficult for people. I think they want it to be a science like physics. I'm not sure the science of physics is actually different than that, but they want a concrete map of how we'll go from where we don't want to be to a better place. And it's only in small bits that we go anywhere. We can lay out the plan, but that won't be reality in the end, right? We'll reroute anyway, even if we have that concrete plan. So that's what I was.
Yeah. You as a psychiatrist, Melissa, and you as an engineer, Clayton, we are all engaged in design. And the problem is that we don't see the science of design, or we don't study design the way we study other things. There is the first psychologist who won a Nobel Prize, Herbert Simon. One day he was watching an ant at the beach and said, oh, we think that all the complexity of the path of the ant is because she has something in her brain. It has something in its brain, planning everything. No, it's the terrain, the niche that creates everything. And then he said, we should create the sciences of the artificial, the sciences of design, because humans are by nature designers. Everything that surrounds us, my coffee cup, the screen of Zoom, and my computer, my glasses, my makeup, everything, our clothes, all have been designed. And instead of calling ourselves Homo faber, which is the hominid that makes things, we call ourselves Homo sapiens, and disregard the fact that we are all the time designing the meal for our family, the type of person our children are going to be. We are designers, and we do not pay attention to the way we design as much as we should. And even when I say that I use artificiality in my work, I have said to other people are like, oh, artificial is bad. No, artificial is who we are. Artificial is what allows my hair to be so soft because I use a conditioner. I just don't use mud from the river. It's just the lights. Everything is artificial, and we don't pay attention to it. And by saying artificial, I'm saying it has been humanly designed, and there are principles of design, and there are a few, there are more now, but a few cognitive scientists of the mind that focus on design and what principles to follow, some of which are what I already said: start small and try often and learn all the time, which is what we do in engineering and you do in psychiatry. But we are not conscious. And I like to say, like, Leonardo da Vinci, he was an artist because he painted the Mona Lisa and other works of art. He was a scientist. He kept records of, the development of different plants, like the tomato, and he drew important things in mathematics, but he was also a designer. He designed an airplane that didn't fly, it was like 500 years ago. He was a designer, a scientist, and an artist. As an artist, he pursued beauty. As a scientist, he pursued the truth. And as a designer, he pursued the good. And that's what I'm trying to do with the Wisdom Project, to invite people to recognize that we already do design, not reflectively. We never think of it as design. That's Melissa designing a new life for the patient, and you, Clayton, designing a new way of being for the community and for the software products that you are developing with your teams. We are designers. We are the homo faber. And there are certain principles of design that have been uncovered by these scientists that I mentioned, one of whom is called Donald Norman. He's a pioneer in this field, and he has been elaborated in a very long career. What are the principles that we follow when we do design? And I am trying at the Wisdom Project to follow those principles. Choose a wicked problem, not all the wicked problems in the world, only one. And then go about it with a design mentality. Trial after trial, cycle after cycle, always in incremental beats. See what's happening. Willing to learn, because the wicked problem has many faces, many dimensions that were not visible at the initial moments. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking like a scientific approach to dissecting the wicked problem and using, experimentation. It's like you take the bag of the design principles and you're going to apply them to these wicked problems, but one at a time, one principle at a time. It's like, we're going to try this and see, kind of like what Melissa was saying before. So we'll try something, see what results we get. Maybe we get some results or we don't. And then we try something else until we find what most maybe efficiently solves this problem. Is it along that line?
Yeah, imagine that the first person who designed a chair, like the chair that I'm sitting in, the person didn't come with a chair. Okay, I have the chair in my head. This is the perfect chair. No, we started doing chairs, and this, we did the first chair, we using wood, and it was okay. And then it broke, and then we realized we needed to do something else. And then the second chair, it creates back pain. So, okay, no, let me do. So we have been doing chairs for thousands of years until we get these very fancy, ergonomic, expensive chairs where we sit all day in front of our computers. It's an interactive process of incremental improvement. Iterative and interactive. We interact with the subject, with the problem or the subject matter or the wood. We do iterations because we do many, many chairs. And then we do incremental improvements. My 3 I's of the Wisdom Project. And when I say, and you were part of the Wisdom Project workshop, the fundamentals workshop, when we say, we are using this tool, it's because you have a project, you want to create the goodness of your project, and then I invite you to play with different tools. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
This idea of design, I'd never thought about it like that. I mean, the first time I'd heard you speak about design, I thought that was really mind-blowing for me, which is interesting because you're right, we're always designing, but thinking about designing your life, designing your, you think maybe physically about your physical space, but you're designing how you'll structure your life, raising your children, how you'll teach them, what, rhythms and rituals and things that you'll adopt and why that's important. And you are designing. I think we all are all the time. And I encounter so many people who don't feel they have a sense of control over their life. And what powerful way to highlight what they can do, that you can be the designer. If you want a better relationship with your mother-in-law, you can set the goal for the next conversation to be a better conversation and continue working, right? You don't just have to be there having a poor relationship. And so that's an incredible concept that I think needs to be highlighted. I'm glad that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So when we do the workshop that you participated, that we explore with many different tools that are also artifacts because they have been created by humans. When we say, okay, let's do this exercise, then let's implement this technique. Somebody did it years ago. If we do an exercise that was created by Socrates and engaged in a dialogue, that's an artifact. That's something somebody designed and has been improved and changed throughout many years. So participating in one of the Wisdom Project workshops is for me an invitation to design the way we want to be in the world. That's why I say, okay, you didn't like this tool, choose another one, the one that fits you at the moment. I remember a person who came twice to the Wisdom Project. He got into one of the tools we use, one of the artifacts called focusing, created by a psychologist called Eugene Gendling. And basically, we focused on a particular issue, and then we clear. It has step 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, and you can find it on the web. This particular tool was so helpful to him that for about 3 months, that's the only thing he wanted to do. So we talked, and I'm like, okay, but there were like 34 tools in the program, try mixed it. And no, this is incredible. And he was finishing his graduate school in psychology and doing his practicum. And where he was working, they allowed him to use tools from the Wisdom Project program. And he started teaching focusing to his patients. And then one day he said, I need to talk, Iris, because focusing is not working any longer for me. It's working for my patients, but not for me. And I just said, well, change it. There were so many. So he did. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, he wrote me that, it was working again. He abandoned it. And then after 3 weeks, he retook it because it's very important for him. So the idea is we are designers, and designers use what works. For what? For the good of the project. Not what works in general. For the good of my project. Improving my relationship with my mother-in-law, I use different tools. So I deliver the good for my particular project. That's the whole strategy of the Wisdom Project. Make ourselves designers of our personal life, our family life, our work life, and our community life. We use science, of course. We can use art, of course. But those are very 2 different types of inquiry. Leonardo as an artist, Leonardo da Vinci as an artist, pursued beauty. Leonardo da Vinci as a scientist pursued the truth. And we at the Wisdom Project, as designers, pursue the good. One project at a time. The good of one project. But then when the project is done and we have succeeded and we have improved, let's say, the relationship with our mother-in-law, which was the goal of the project, we now know that there are tools that can help us. And we can take that particular tool that helped us with our mother-in-law and use it with a friend or with a colleague at work or participating in a project in the community. This particular tool that I talked about, that this psychologist was using in his work, can also be used to understand social challenges, difficult problems. I'm engaged in a group where there are people who want to talk about, how to approach climate change or political polarization, etc. And that particular tool, focusing, could be also used for that. So I guess the person that I know that has been using it for himself for now almost like 10 months could then be an expert in teaching the rest of us how to use focusing to apply into another project, to create the goodness for that other project. And that's the whole strategy.
Yeah, I like it, and I think it also comes with a lot of you'd say positive side effects, like you're mentioning there, because what happens in the Wisdom Project, there's a lot of collaboration. Like you're all working on different projects, but you're sharing your insights of what you're learning in your small project. And what I came to discover along the way was, like through practicing how to design, you're building that muscle of developing your intentionality, and in the process you get very empowered to actually be able to apply a design principle. You look at a situation and you feel like you can influence it. You can try something with that situation, as opposed to looking for advice, first looking for someone else's opinion. You feel you can try. You can also engage with your own original approach, which you may not have been able to do if you didn't have that design mentality, that design approach. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of many positive side effects.
Yeah, it's like we are invited to experiment with our project. When we are going through the Wisdom Project Fundamentals program, the invitation is to experiment using the different tools on behalf of the good of the project we brought. And because we have the project as something very concrete, we can see if the tool works or not and the impact it can have. So we never talked about this during the workshops, because this is basically the foundation of everything. But this is the foundation. This is what holds everything together. Melissa, you have any comments?
I don't exactly have a comment that I went through the course, through the workshop, and I did this, and I never thought about it as design until later, after the workshop, when you and I had a separate conversation about it. And I find that also very interesting, that we're doing it and it's a process. The description, you said we never said that in the workshop. And I think in some ways, it's maybe almost helpful for me to think about it after the fact. We go through the process of identifying something in your life, maybe your work life, your personal life, that you'd like to change or grow, and we go through and we apply tools, many of them from eclectic old tools, we're pulling them together. And then after, we talk about it as design. And I think that's it's very interesting, because in the beginning, if you'd told me the same things, I wouldn't have had a framework to make any sense of why it was important. And then now I do.
Yeah, but it has, the whole idea is to create a transformative experience for the participants in the workshop. And I think it does work as a transformative experience because of the method I use, which I'm going to describe next. But you don't need to think of, this is the theoretical basis, basically. This is based on the science of design, the science of the artificial. And it has principles that people follow. Start small, try often, learn all the time, etc., etc. Yeah. But now that you know that this is what was behind it, it makes total sense, as you were saying, Melissa. Okay.
Do you wanna go into the principles?
The principles of design.
Yeah, because you've been talking a bit,
Yes,
pointing at
okay.
them a bit.
So basically, you know, it's a new science. First, I have to say it's a new science. And okay, if you go into software, they have principles of software design. If you go into engineering, how to design a 90 floors high building, there are principles of design. Different specialties in medicine, in you know, different principles. Perhaps they don't call it principles of design in psychiatry, Melissa, but there are ways to approach a particular challenge. But the people who are now being meta, thinking about, oh, this is what we do everywhere. Our civilizations is built on our ability to design. What are the principles? So when we design things, and this guy, Donald Norman, is a pioneer. He wrote a book years ago called The Design of Everyday Things. And since then, he has been refining. He works with software, how to design the interface of a website. That's how he started. You know, how to make the computer easy to use, that we don't have to carry a big handbook that we have to open every time, how to do this or that, how to make the interaction intuitive. And then he has been refining those principles of design. But they are not, in my opinion, they are not finished. But I'm going to read some of them. Make things visible. The more that I'm going to read them. Make things visible, offer feedback, make affordances explicit. So basically, allow people to see what to do with a tool. Start small and check progress often. So that's kind of it's a science in development. And if you read his books, there are different principles and he keeps changing them. And I hope one day somebody will put together all the principles of design in general that we follow as designers, as Homo faber. But it's not a finished work. As you see, Clayton, in your field, you do something called agile, and it follows the principles of design that I just read. So perhaps one day somebody says, oh, that's exactly what we do in psychiatry. You see, because it's exactly what you do in psychiatry. But nobody has yet, to my knowledge, put that together, that we are mainly designers, Homo faber, and that we design for the good, not for the higher good. We design for the good of the chair I want to create, for the good of the software program you are creating, for the good of the patient, Melissa, that you are treating. We design for the good of the project that we choose in the Wisdom Project. But in doing so, we exercise the muscle of design, and we exercise our expertise using these various tools, so we can then transfer that knowledge into the next project. And again, that's why the motto of the Wisdom Project is changing our world one project at a time. And it's a pleasure for me to share this with you too, who have been twice participants, and very active and very rewarding to have you two here, but also in the workshop. So now I'm going to transfer quickly to two other things, the method and the framework. The method that I use, now you know the strategy. The strategy is wisdom by design. Let's be designers of our worlds. We can make it. One day we will be able to meet together and tackle political polarization using these tools. You see, so that's one way of an initial way. The Wisdom Project strategy is wisdom by design. Next, what method? Okay, I have the strategy, but what method am I going to use? Okay, I already did a whole series of 4 videos. It's on my YouTube channel called The Real Method. That's the method, REAL. So I'm not going to go a lot into it today, but I'm just going to mention it. What is the real method? R.E.A.L. is ritual. We follow a ritual process because that's something very ingrained in our capacity to relate to each other, the ritual, the repetitive actions that connect us into familiarity. Ritual engagement with artifacts. The E of the method, real method, is engagement. We engage, and then there is a meaning to the engagement. We engage in an embodied way, in an inactive way, in an extended way, and this is something that I explained in that other series, which is the way the science of the mind currently sees the mind as embodied, embedded, enacted, emoted, etc. That's the engagement piece of the method, the real method. And A is artifact, the artificial. We engage with a bunch of tools that are not present in nature, that have been created by humans, like the focusing method. That's what we do. Ritual engagement with artifacts in pursuit of what? Why do we do that? The concept is the liminal. Liminal is a word that involves the sense of transition. We go from one place to the other. That's a liminal movement. But the concept also means that I don't know where I'm going. As Melissa said, you cannot tell the patient, this is the goal, and we're going to be measuring it, A, B, C, D. And Clayton does that for the engineering teams. He can do, we are going to be there, ABC, because he does it in small chunks. But he cannot just go and say the big thing, you see? Because he's using design. We are all using design. So the real method is when you want to practice this or want to create your own wisdom project or whatever you want to do is create a ritual that gives people connection and safety, and engage them with artifacts, with these tools, pre-selected tools. And I'm going to do a whole series about how to select the tools and why these tools are good with those other tools, etc., etc. That's going to be after we finish our series. And then the liminal, in the pursuit of what? Of a transformational space that we still don't know. And during the workshop, we talk about the imaginal. And people get very connected with the imaginal. The imaginal being a place of honor for our imagination. Because we tend to think of imagination, oh, like, you know, it's like fantasy. We diminished its importance. But as designers, the imagination has to take center stage, because I know how a good relationship works, and that's what I want to have with my mother-in-law. The imaginal takes prevalence because I know how a good chair should feel, and that knowing, that imaginal sense of the chair guides my designing. So the liminal is exploring what is to come, being willing to go through a transition, and being guided by this concept of, I don't know, I want to say the imaginal queen, like the concept that what we can imagine, we shouldn't discard it or think is lesser than what is real, like this paper. That is that ability that we have to imagine that makes us good designers.
I would even add that that liminal is like you'd say maybe our taste for the good, like our innate taste for the good, because we are using what we know to be good in the imaginal to make it real. Because we already know, like you're describing, like I know what a good chair feels like. And so I'm going to use that feeling of what a good chair is going to be like to make to design a chair that meets that feeling of a good chair. So I already have the feeling of a good chair, and I just want to create an artifact outside that meets what I already have on the inside. And I think that we usually have those feelings of what the good is, and they're already in us, and we need to, to design our world so that it's in alignment with what we already know to be good. Uh, yeah, at least that's what I'm getting so far, and I think that's what we're doing in the Wisdom Project, especially with those wicked problems.
During the Wisdom Project workshop, I used a few times the image of a Roman god, Janus, the god Janus, that is represented as two faces, one against the other, one looking to one side and the other looking to the other side. And they used to put it in at the doors, on the top of a door. So inviting people, okay, you are leaving this space, you are getting into another one and you don't know what it is. And that door is liminal, is the new space. But you have to have imagination to what is to come, because otherwise you wouldn't take the jump. And what has been suggested by philosophers and cognitive scientists, that we should give imagination a better place in our lives, and that, like calling it imaginal. So when we start, in the workshop, we invoke the presence of a sage, King Solomon, that is acknowledged as very wise. And then we do a kind of visualization, a contemplation exercise, where we, the way I guide it, and that's another thing that I will explain in another series, so people can really feel themselves that they are talking with Solomon, or learning from Solomon, or learning from a sage. And that's the imaginal. And because giving that big importance to the imaginal, then I think, I think the Wisdom Project becomes a transformative experience, because it's inviting us to use the imaginal to guide us through the creation of the goodness of the project. Any comments to that?
I think you're saying that very well, because if I use our example of your relationship with your mother-in-law, sitting and imagining the good relationship is part of the process of designing from where we are to that better relationship. If you don't use the imaginal as a space to sit and see in your mind what could be, then you don't have that guide. You're just sort of, you're designing without that image. And so it makes a lot of sense. It's very important to sit and hold a space for, to envision what it could be like before you begin or progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to really believe it, because I think when you think of it in a way that you believe it like it can be real, then you're gonna take it seriously. You're gonna, yeah.
Making it
I
real.
like
Making it real. I try to create something called thingness, like a thingness. I try to make real the experiences. So the tools are combined through a real method, ritual engagement with artifacts in pursuit of the liminal. They are put together in a way that become a thingness. They have this thingness, this reality to them, and you can see it as the workshop progresses, that people take more and more seriously the work of design that we are doing together. Everyone working in their particular project, but together sharing the experience of transformation. So we start with aspiration. We aspire to be wiser, to reason better in relationship to our project. And we start with the example of King Solomon. And one way to give us courage is to remember everybody that Solomon was very wise, but also very, very, very dumb. That he made so many mistakes in his life that part of what he made him so famous was his inability to control his sexual life and his desire for gambling and the bad administration of his personal finances or the kingdom finances, but very, very wise in other areas to give advice to people. So a researcher, Igor Grossman from the University of Waterloo in Canada, he has given a name to that strange Solomon paradox. He calls it the Solomon paradox, which is how come this guy was so good and so wise in certain areas and so terrible in other areas. And he discovered, Igor Grossman discovered, that is because of something called the Solomon paradox, that when you have psychological distance from something, you are wiser. So we start our transformative experience of the Wisdom Project by aspiring to be wise like Solomon, but also by understanding that Solomon was wise only when he had psychological distance from something, when he was not about his children or his finances or his wives, when he was somebody who came to his palace to ask for advice, when he was a judge. He was really, really wise. So we start by aspiring to be wise, to reason better about our wicked problem, and using the example of King Solomon so we can take distance from our project. So we ask the sage to give us advice, and that's how we start about our project. And it works. And this concept of psychological distance that cognitive psychologist Igor Grossman has uncovered and proven is very, very helpful to start the journey towards the liminal.
That brings me back to one of the first things Clayton said today, which was that, you know, you maybe previously had wanted to go to another person for advice, and then you go through the Wisdom Project and you realize that you can use tools to come to your own answers. And that's through exercises that give you psychological distance. You can be your own advisor, which is maybe the advisor that you want. You want some psychological distance to give you perspective, and that's why maybe you're asking for advice. But I don't know, I think the process sometimes of seeking advice is very unsatisfying because it's not quite what you're hoping for or whatever. What you're hoping for is to gain your own psychological distance and your own perspective on your problem yourself, not to just give it to someone else to answer.
Yeah. So the hope is that as we do iterative, interactive, and incremental improvement in cycle after cycle after cycle, we develop new us. We develop new me's. You see, using the tools to continue changing ourselves, our relationships, our families, our workplace, and our community in a cycle of design. I know, Clayton, you have been doing a lot of work for years with yourself and your friends and your community, but now you know how delighted I was when you published your story, your short story, about your many me's. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I recently wrote an article series that I titled "The Village of the Me's," trying to, you know, talk about that experience of being in different situations and having to be different kinds of people based off the different situation in which you are. And it was very interesting while exploring that. But also, when I wrote it and shared it with people, like it, it was very resonant with people because they felt it was true, because you can't just be the same person in every situation. You have to keep adjusting to adapt to the situation, and keep changing the hats. Like, oh, I'm now having a conversation, so this is not the situation for me to be a father. But then when my child comes into this situation, then I have to be both. And when I move away from here, then I have to just be that. Then when I go to a workplace and I'm being a consultant, then now I'm being a consultant. There's different ways that I have to adapt to that situation. And there are things I can do which I can't do in these other situations. Vivek uses a very interesting example of, like, when you are swimming, you're not eating, and you can't use the same skills of swimming to eat or to eat to swim. And so you really have to develop that flexibility. And I think through practicing things like what we're doing with the Solomon paradox, it really helps you to learn to develop that distance, so you can see how to be in a situation and become your own advisor. You know what you're saying earlier on, Melissa. It's like, I want some advice, but and I've seen this happen. Like, someone will ask for advice, and they will not like the advice they get, because, of course, the person who gives the advice is not them, and they want specific advice, but only them, they hold the appropriate perspective for the advice they're looking for. And so it can't, like, no other outside advice is going to be as good as the one they get from inside. But through this technique, you actually learn to become, that advisor self of yours, who will give you the appropriate advice, which you will agree with, and it will be very helpful. So, yeah, it's very interesting that you came to the village of the Me's. Yes, there's many Me's.
The many me's, that's the name of the story. Yeah. So aspiration is the first cognitive style that we cultivate at the Wisdom Project. And we start by invoking the imaginal presence of King Solomon to ask for advice about our project. And the idea is to learn that when we take psychological distance, and it's not us answering the question, but a wise person that we imagine, King Solomon, we start learning more and more about our project. And then the idea is that we incorporate these tools as mindware, basically software, hardware, mindware that become part of who we are. And that's the whole end goal. Make them mindware. Like, okay, Iris, what is needed right now? Okay, I need to do some focusing, or I need to do some imagining King Solomon. And then I use the tools to help me navigate the different challenges, the wicked problems of my personal, family, work, and community life. So next week, we are going to record another session. And this time, I'm going to introduce the framework that we go through to cultivate wise reasoning, which is based on John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis video series. And I adapted it, but I chose 7 different cognitive styles that we cultivate. And the first one is aspiration, that was introduced today. And aspiration starts with honoring imagination by calling it imaginal. Some writers have said imaginal love, because when we honor imagination, we honor it with love. And it's from that place that we start the journey towards the cultivation of wisdom in the Wisdom Project. Any comments you want to make before we close?
I comment that I think I'm really going to enjoy going back through the material that we did in participation and thinking about it from a knowledge perspective, which I think really offers something to me. I craved that as I went through. I would ask questions, you know. I really had a lot of desire to understand from a intellectual perspective. And so
you are the perfect partner for this journey. That's what we are doing, putting the intellectual piece into the Wisdom Project. I call it the foundation. And you, Clayton?
No, I'm just excited to get on this journey and, you know, uncover the design of the design process.
All right. Thank you very much. I am very grateful. I'll see you next to record the second session of the series, The Foundations of the Wisdom Project. Bye.
Yes.
I
Bye.